The f did I do there? Two years ago, Eric Watson invited me to participate in his clinic, DBK, in LA during NAMM weekend. It was a huge honor to be invited since I'd been to the clinic the year before and seen the likes of D-Mile, DeAndre Montgomery, and Nick Smith play. I prepared my ass off and hoped for the best. The performance went okay. When I finally saw the footage, I cringed a little. The reason I bring this up is that 2 years after my performance at DBK, I was surfing some Sharik Tucker videos on YouTube, and what came up in my suggested videos but my own performance at DBK. As I watched eating a sub sandwich, I was like, this isn't as bad as I remember it. So I decided to do something I've never done before, a breakdown of my own playing. 2 years on, what holds up and what do I wish I'd done differently? So, I like what I did at the beginning of this tune in terms of the choreography and the groove. I don't like the way it feels, but first let me demonstrate sort of what we're doing. The tune Sweatin' is in 5, so the basic groove is something like 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm splitting that up between the ride cymbal, which in the case of the clinic is a stack, and the left hand playing ghosted strokes on the hats. So it sounded something like 4, 5. And 2 years on, my biggest feeling about this is I should have just leaned into the groove more. I seemed really preoccupied with the texture. So it sounds cool, but it just doesn't sound like when Dana played it. And a big reason is that I should have just played, or failing that, really sort of more bottom up, emphasizing the kick and the snare more. Let's go on. Okay, so it's worth discussing the groove I did in the sort of breakdown section. And again, this is something I wish I'd leaned into a little bit more. But it's basically this, 4, 5. And again, I wish I'd started with something simpler, even just 4, 5. But let me really quickly break down that groove with the cross hand and the hand to hand, because it's going to reoccur throughout the piece. So 4, 5. And there are some things you can do with that, like but everything I wish I'd been leaning into the kick drum a little more. Okay, let's go on. All right, so there's a fill that I like, that I do a lot, which again, I'd like a little bit of a do-over on, which goes something like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the sticking is. And you can obviously orchestrate that around. And in the original tempo in 5, 4, 5. Something like that. Okay, moving on. Okay, so my biggest critique of myself in this section of Sweatin' is that I kind of couldn't decide on a groove to do. And part of the thing that makes Dana Hawkins' original rendition of this so cool is he's got that half note going throughout. So the bass line is going 4, 5, bounce, 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 bounce. And Dana's keeping the ride cymbal bell and maybe the open hats too. So again, I could have just done something really simple on the open hats, like 4, 5. And then maybe transitioned to 4, 5. Again, hindsight 2020. Obviously, I dropped my stick there too. That's not even the biggest deal. That doesn't bug me so much. Let's go on and look at some of the good fills that I pulled off. Okay, so in that clip, I'm playing the same fill as before. And again, I wish I'd just kept that a little simpler. 4, 5. I think that in my youthful psychology, I was trying to go for more than I could actually do, which is something that I discuss in the practice course not to do. So let's go on, and I want to look at this little breakdown section during Evan's solo now. So I actually like what I did in that section, and I can tell looking back that I'm trying to break free of some creative walls. So I'm throwing a lot against the wall, essentially to prove to myself that I've got some range. And that's a common thing people talk about when they're in pressure playing situations, is like they feel like their range is restricted. So it's all good. I just wish I had kept quarters on the hats. 4, 5. And the quarters and the hats just allow you to get away with a lot more stuff and just make it feel more grounded. 4, 5. If you're noticing a theme throughout, it's I wish I'd committed more to the groove and played more heavily on the kick drum and the snare drum. Okay, now let's go on to the reprise of the verse at the end of the bass solo and into the solo itself. I like what I did there, and I want to break down really quickly that little lick. And it's a 5-note pattern over triplets, and it's just. And let me play the hi-hat on quarters so you can hear what that would sound like against the pulse of the quarters. So 4, 5. So in context, 4, 5. Now let's move on. So I like this little lick I did here too, and let me demonstrate that for you. 4, 5. And that's in 5/8 or arguably 5/16, but it cycles over the top of big 5, and let me show you that. 4, 5. So that's really hip if you're playing a regular groove and you want to go into kind of double time. So let me show that to you really slowly. 4, 5. Okay, let's move on. So I'm not tickled about how that fill ended up. And again, I think it's because I got caught up in the fill itself and I wasn't counting in my head. It's the same. Which, if you can't tell, I was kind of a one-trick pony with the fills. But I wish I'd done something like. Okay, let's go on. So, I'm actually interested about what I did there. I'm going to listen to this again. Okay, I got it. So it was this. And I like the way that sounds over 5, 4, 5. 3, 4, 5. I want to call attention to another thing that I'm doing a little bit in the 16th note part of that solo, which is another sort of 5/8, 5/16 thing, which is. And I'm using that in combination with this. So putting those two things together, let me do it a little bit slowly, you might come up with some ideas like. Let me try to actually play that over 5, 4, 5. That's one way it might fall. Here's another, 4, 5. Okay, let's listen to the conclusion of this solo. So this is a lot more of the same, but there's one triplet lick I'm doing that I also want to call out and analyze. Okay, so essentially the lick is this, 1, 2. And that's a 3-beat pattern. 1, 2, 3. So here's how you might play that over 5, 4, 5. Or another couple things you could do with that. Watching this footage, one sign of immaturity rings out with crystal clarity. I'm trying to sound like Dana instead of myself. If I had to do this over again, here's what I'd do differently. First, I'd play things that sound like me instead of a bad imitation of Dana, even if that's simpler and less sophisticated sounding. Second, I'd focus on the groove and making that solid before I did anything else. Anyway, I'm sharing this with you guys because I'm always encouraging you to share your playing, even the not so finished bits, so I kind of had to walk the walk. Thanks again to Eric for inviting me to the DBK clinic in 2017. Did you guys like this breakdown video? Would you like to see more things like this? If you did, go ahead and leave me a comment below. Anyway, ciao for now.